Horizon just home CGX and this is shut up about F-35, which channel Lazerpig. Yes, I've been watching a jet plane videos recently because of the fact electrician equipment video in general, like tanks, things, and especially jet. Uh, then I watched a mustard video. I watched F-15 video mustard. Then I watched the Blackbird video, and I always heard about F-35, like it's like the next level of plane. But then I also heard like, okay, it wasn't as successful as they would have thought, and this and that. So yeah, I've never heard or watched anything about it. And then there's like this came up in a recommended feed, literally the first video on the feed, like Lazerpig made a F-35 video, and I heard of Lazerpig, like people talking about how great the channel is. I'm like, what the hell? That's what this one. It's like a 40-minute video, so documentary level video. So it's gonna be interesting. Yeah, F-35 I think was developed very recently, right? It's like one of the newer ones. So I'm guessing it's just like made from the scratch, supposed to replace F-15 or something. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting.
All right, so there were some funding and development issues with the Osprey.
The military?
Yes, incredibly. Sometimes military procurement isn't that good.
Just keep making the A-10, okay? That's all I'm asking. It's good at its job.
Decommissioning that, as far as I remember.
The F-35 to do it. Just keep making the A-10, okay? That's all I'm asking. It's good at its job. We don't need the F-35 to do it.
I don't get it. F-35 is supposed to replace A-10? Is that what it is? No worries, so that decommissioning A-10 Warthog, if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure I've seen somewhere.
I have started to realize that when you're talking about modern warfare, and in particular the weapons and machines of a modern warfare, the average person who wants to talk to me about it with their scruffy beards and their cardigans and their vacant stares, even if they have a keen military interest, know as much about it as they do the female orgasm.
Seriously?
Which is not much. And some even claim it doesn't exist. I feel sorry for straight women sometimes, I really do. So with that in mind, discussing something like the F-35, which has been built for a future war in a world where things like suicide drones and smartphones exist and are accessible to things like local militias, is kind of easy to see why the average idiot whose war mind is still stuck in a 1970s concept of combined arms warfare might find it confusing and see it really only as a trillion-dollar jet designed to just make a few generals rich and thus are considerably more susceptible to things like this. An article by Forbes, obviously the most credible website of all the internet, which states that finally the US Air Force
I mean, when Forbes says it, you might as well throw the F-35 at that point. Like, let's just throw it in the... Who cares about it? Just throw it away. Forbes said it, that's the end of everything.
has admitted that the F-35 was a bad idea. It's a terrible aircraft, and they're now looking to replace it with a lighter F-16 style fighter designed for dogfighting. And if that was true, that would make Pierre Sprey right, and me, Lazerpig, wrong. And thus, I would owe him a deep, deep apology. But do I though? I mean, really? Do I? Because... I know some of you may find this hard to believe, but this article posted on the internet by an internet site which dominates half my screen with an ad may not be 100% genuine. In fact, in a fit of behaviour so uncharacteristic of the mainstream media, this headline, which is the only part of the article most people have read, may be something of clickbait. I know! The shock! The horror! Chapter 3 of the 1926
Clickbait is so fucking horrible that I bet if that if the article read like F-35 stealth has failed, and then when you read the article, I won't be surprised to say like it's failed to maintain what it wanted to do, but it surpassed it, so it's failed in that way, some shit like that, and that would basically piss you off. Like, how do you translate that into failed, right? It failed to maintain expectation, but because it surpassed it. At that time, you just want to punch them. I won't be surprised if that's the article that says.
Classic Winnie the Pooh describes the titular character Pooh Bear and his friend Piglet discovering a series of tracks which they assumed to belong to a creature known as the woozle. Yet, as much as they follow these tracks in hunt of the mythical creature, they can never quite seem to catch up to it. Enter the book's protagonist, Christopher Robin, who, after some brief investigating, discovers that the tracks that Pooh Bear and Piglet have been following were in fact their own, and the woozle does not actually exist. Since then, the term the woozle effect has been used to describe a situation where a claim is made with little or no supporting evidence, usually in a book or an online publication, which then leads to various other publications citing it as a reference, without checking it or doing any proper peer review. Further publications then cite them as a reference, and so on and so forth until you have a chain of citations that simply reference each other as a sourceable material without ever actually presenting.
Okay, first of all, which war has US been part of in very recently? I really can't remember like proper war they've been part of where F-35 failed. How do you know if it's failed, if it's if you haven't deployed it in real situation? Like that's when they know. You deployed it, it fails, then you know that it failed. Until then, how do you know it failed? Or everybody just like basically jumping. See, commercialization of a military thing is just weird. Right? People, oh, look at the iPhone failed, Samsung Galaxy failed, this failed, Intel failed, Nvidia failed. Great. After $1 trillion project, a military project that you don't know shit about, you're going to talk about this? Come on.
Any credible evidence, hence why things like Wikipedia or the fabled r/ask historians are so frequently wrong, as their criteria for any claim to be considered credible is that it has to have appeared written somewhere in a book. Hence why so many people think the F-35 is a useless, expensive garbage plane, because, well, the press say so, and they say so because, well, the other press say so, and they say so because, well, the first lot of press said so, and then you follow it all the way back down the bullshit tree until you get to the Russian propaganda channel Russia Today. You've probably heard of it, and its interviews with Pierre Sprey, who until his death was an avid critic of the F-35, and the main source of most of the bullshit you heard about it, despite the fact that he's never worked in the aerospace industry and is more famous for lying about how big and important he was in the development of the F-15 or the A-10 or whatever plane he's claiming he designed today, because once he worked in the closet in the basement of the Pentagon as an advisor to an advisor to an advisor to an advisor to the Secretary of Defense, who had absolutely nothing to do with the project, and whom Wikipedia still credits as the developer of the A-10 because, well, it was written in a book. I mean, what more proof do you need? Of course it's true. Someone wrote it down. Hi, it's post-production and very tired Lazerpig here. Quick note, at the time of writing the script for this video, Wikipedia still credited Pierre Sprey as the designer of the A-10. However, over the past month, there seems to have been quite a bit of back and forth, and it seems as of the 1st of this month, all references to Sprey have been removed from the article, though some people do seem intent on putting it back up, so it may have reappeared at some point, and, you know, it's Wikipedia. Part of the reason behind this...
Okay, Wikipedia, if I remember correctly, it's not the same way it was a long time ago when anybody can edit it. Nowadays, if you want to edit it, you need to be someone within the community. I don't know, editors, whatever, right? In order to edit it. You can't just edit it. And they still fuck it up. That is some next level shit, man, right? Not surprised me, like Wikipedia nowadays is relied a lot. Like it's Wikipedia, it must be true, which is obviously not the case most of the time. It's Wikipedia. Why isn't like people who actually were part of the development come out and just basically say to Wikipedia people like, remove this bullshit, he wasn't part of it or something like that?
Was really that the only real source for Sprey's involvement was the autobiography of John Boyd, who was one of the major players in the reformist movements. Now, this book was published after Boyd's death, and the author never actually spoke to him, only his friends and colleagues, including one Pierre Sprey, in which he claims Boyd became interested in his work because of his involvement in the A-10 program, which is not true. They were locked in a waiting room together. But that would mean that the only source for Sprey's involvement in the A-10 program is Sprey himself, in a book in which he cites himself as a source, making him the ultimate woozle. Can't make this shit up. Anyway, back on with the video. Once you get to that point, you start to realize that pretty much every claim, and I mean pretty much every...
Wait a minute, is that F-35? That looks sick. Look at that. Look at the shape of it and everything. Damn, man. I've never seen F-35 until now, but look at how it looks.
Like 99% of them made about the F-35 is simply a chain of Sprey saying something for money on a Russian government-funded propaganda channel, and then every minor or major publication tacking its own thoughts and opinions onto it and citing each other as a source in the world's dumbest game of Chinese whispers. Until we get to the point where a well-meaning podcast about engineering disasters advocates for the continued project of an aircraft that hasn't been built since the 70s, has killed more of its own soldiers than every other US aircraft combined, suffered the most losses out of any modern US aircraft, and is hilariously outdated, as it requires its pilots to fly low and slow and use a pair of binoculars to identify targets, which it frequently misidentifies, is highly vulnerable to shoulder-mounted launchers, and requires a modernization package that is more expensive per unit than a brand new F-35. A plane they don't understand and would stick their fingers in their ear and scream, "La la 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 la, I'm not listening. Meme logic is better than reality because it's more funny and we need their views, la 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 la." So no, I don't owe Pierre Sprey an apology, regardless of what Forbes or the various podcasters or people in my comment section think. He is wrong. F-35 good. A-10 still questionable if it was ever effective to be.
Seriously, the way to people like A10 is like immensely good. A10 is this, A10 is that. At the same time, also like account of like A10 can be really problematic. That's the reason why they're decommissioning in the first place, right? I'm just thinking like who's like a, working military strategist, like actual like active duty general or something. If you ask to talk to them and just like, what the fuck are you talking about? None of you know shit. Get out of here. They will just basically get pissed off. Like, do you understand how any of this works? Do you know what qualifies something to be working or not? Do you know what F-35's job is? How do you know it failed? It never been in kind of a dogfight situation in the first place.
Begin with, and is generally only remembered fondly by people because big gun go brrr. Please continue to write that in the comments. It only gets funnier after the 600th time. But let's say you're not me. You're Sebastian, the average femboy that infests my Discord. How do you, as just a regular guy in your programmer socks, spot a woozle in the wild? How do you know when media bias and lazy journalists have wrapped you up in their little tentacles? Well, buckle up, boyo, for I have a question for you. Has this ever happened to you?
Welcome back to Piggy Springer. My son saw a swastika and now he's gay.
My son saw a swastika and is now gay! Mom, I told you I'm 24 now. I just want to go out and drink beer. What has America done? Hi, I'm Lazerpig. By day, mild-mannered pig-shaped human, but by night, equally as useless, but, more drunk. We've all been in that situation where we've been forced to return to the nest for the holidays and be confronted by the entire family who you never talk to. Your grandma makes a vague, racist comment about people with blue hair. Your mum tries to defend them out of embarrassment because she took an online class in wokeness, and your dad picks up the newspaper and says the whole thing has something to do with 5G or trans people or single mothers or barcodes or whatever the media is trying to make us all blame so we don't have to take personal responsibility for our actions. It's not your fault, it's never your fault, it's them, the other people, the liberals, the gays, the neo-Nazis, boomers, capitalism, communism, I don't know, whatever. And only when we finally get rid of all of these people can we get back to normal and you get your just reward. Even if deep down, you know they'll just find a new enemy to distract you with, because as long as you're scared and angry, you'll keep buying newspapers, or subscribing to news services, or just clicking articles because of their catchy clickbait titles that trigger that deep emotional scar you have locked in your brain that causes you to be halfway through thinking about the comment you post before you've even fully read the title that you'll share with all your dumb friends on Twitter like you fucking know anything. Now look down at your filthy, disgusting hands. Gaze into your broken mortal soul and ask yourself the question. There has to be a better way. Hi, I'm Lazerpig. Do you wish there could be a better way? Well, now you can. I'm here with ground news. Don't let the name fool you. It has nothing to do with the ground, sadly. You are not newsworthy, ground. Ground Ground News is not a disgusting mainstream media news network, but one of the first non-biased news comparison websites. That's right! With Ground News, you can actually read the news without any of the bullshit. Finally! Manipulative algorithms gone! Media bias zapped! Echo chambers and confirmation bias? Ha! What even is that? And it was founded by a former NASA engineer, making her more qualified to talk about the F-35 than Pierre Sprey. Ground News.
Seriously?
Not only is every article sourced, it also estimates agenda bias and
Imagine like some idiot in some kind of a forum or something boasted about all this. Somebody from NASA, like, I don't know much about this, but I'm from NASA. Even I know, even I can say one or two shit about this. This is so insane, man. Seriously, this whole debacle so far, if it all just from like some article and that shit, like, I would never basically take that seriously. I would have thought, like, it's like a insider information, like somebody from the military, somebody from the project, or some kind of a failure happened and people are talking. Just people are just claiming that based on their knowledge or shit. They're like, oh, fuck yourself. That's not enough of evidence.
topics based on who else is covering them with these handy little French flags. So you know if stories are more biased towards the left or the right or the center depressing part. It even highlights potential media blind spots, letting you see what the man is trying to stop you finding out. Ground News. It will even tell you your own media bias based on what you read, or with their free online quiz. But best of all, there are no judgments. No one's trying to manipulate you to one side or the other. It's literally just about transparency. They just want you to read the news. Ground News. I'm so excited about Ground News. I sawed this boat in half and repaired it with the power of news. Ground News. Ah yes, the Senate elections. I know nothing about what's going on, but with the power of Ground News, I can not only check related local news in each state, I can even see who's covering what, and even see news stories that would typically be hidden from me. And all of them are sourced right back to the original articles, making it even easier to spot woozles, media bias, and break out of your cognitive bias echo chamber.
How much did you pay for this incredible news?
Sign up is absolutely free. It's a website. You can just go look at it and read the news that hasn't been spoon-fed you by some disgusting mainstream media pipe organ owned by some fat-ass billionaire from his home on
Pirate Adventure Island.
But if you want access to more features like unlimited blind spot feeds, which is actually super useful, factuality distribution, or even if you just want to support this tiny independent team who is honestly doing a great job. I mean, how many neutral parties can you name that actually commit to remaining objective, especially news sources? Then prices start from 83 cents a month. 83 cents. You can't even get a coffee for that. Screw that. Premium service is $2.49. That's like a penny less than the coffee I don't buy because all the coffee places around here are terrible and I brew my own because I'm not a fucking savage. Or you can subscribe to Forbes for $49 and get all your news from one source like your dumbass parents and just assume that they are fully researching all their facts and not just spitballing whatever comes to mind because it sounds vaguely plausible.
Okay, do people really sign up $50 for Forbes? Like, for what? How much things do you need from Forbes that you would actually give $50 for Forbes? I don't know. That's like, I mean, they have the subscriptions. I'm pretty sure like a lot of people would be doing that. I don't know. It's insane. Like, they could just like try to be centered and more people would buy the subscription, right? Before it was like clickbait ad type of shit. But now if they're going hard on subscription things, like they could try to be more unbiased, right? They can try to be more centered and people buy more. I don't know.
And they're judged by how many articles they write and how many clicks they get, and not about how good a journalist they are. Ground News. Click my link in the description to begin your journey. Pierre Sprey and other comedy self-proclaimed military experts were invited onto Russia today to speak in English and be broadcast in English, and no one found this slightly suspicious on how shit the F-35 is. And since then we've had a collection of blog posts, Twitter accounts, and various web news sites that all continue to propagate the same rhetoric without ever actually checking if it's true. Say it with me now. The F-35 cannot maneuver, it cannot carry missiles, it's really expensive, it cannot defeat the Destiny in a dogfight, it costs over $1 billion, it can't... Of course, it's all just a woozle. Sprey cannot back up anything he ever said, and would often refuse to do so, and when he did, his source was, well, himself, and the qualifications and experience he pretends to have in projects that he had nothing actually to do with. Fun fact, in all the documentation I've seen in regards to the development of the F-15, which is when the reformers were in their prime, Sprey is mentioned exactly once. During a meeting to discuss contractors for the F-15's electronic systems, Sprey reportedly barges in and demands that the F-15 be canned in favour of his own design, the F-XX. It's a cool name, but it wasn't really an aircraft design per se, it was just a list of things that he wanted removed from the F-15 which he felt were unnecessary. I'll list what some...
Alright. I know that F-15 was an overkill already because Fox, whatever that was, like, was not as powerful as Soviet said, and it was supposed to beat that, but they didn't know that. And all this thing, like, look at the windshield, butterfree requirement, delete, fail-safe, fall operation, flight control system, reduce the requirement, training requirement, like, why okay, just like reduce all this shit, why not? Like, we'll just wing it. This will cut down the cost and we can do more. Maybe this was mostly based on like how Soviets are really cheaper, Soviet things consider with like F-15 and things like that. But then again, these are the things that made F-15 what is right now. If you cut on all this thing, is it even an F-15 anymore? It's just like some watered down shit. Would that even work? Right? So I don't cut all this down. It's like, it's not a new design, it's just like, remove all these things that made it unique, I guess. Okay, reduce air to ground range and all that. This is insane. Deleted in-flight fault isolation. Okay, this is way too big of a list, man. He just like, okay, remove all this shit. Why do we need it? We just need something like a MiG, right? Copy of a MiG, simplistic and all that.
These things were the navigation equipment, the bulletproof cockpit glass, the ejector seat, the bomb and missile racks, or I should just say missile racks.
Okay, if they didn't want to die because of a bird, they should sign up as a Marine, shouldn't they? Shouldn't they sign up as a jet fighters?
The afterburner, the radar, and the fuel tanks. I'll briefly explain that last one. The fuel tank thing was a John Boyd thing. He fully believed that an aircraft should only have fuel for the dogfight and nothing else. And any extra fuel a plane might need to, say, go somewhere, like, invade a country, would be done via external drop tanks, which obviously the plane would drop the second it encountered an enemy, blow up that enemy with its superior maneuverability, and then ditch in the field after running out of fuel. Boyd also didn't kind of anticipate that, you shoot down that fighter and then another fighter shows up and you have to fight that one as well. This is kind of why the reformers, started to get laughed at. But Sprey wanted to take all that useless shit off the F-15 and replace it all with a radio you could buy in a hardware store, because it's a radio, it does what radios do. A completely unsecure commercial radio in a military aircraft. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, all the things he's saying to remove it, right? All the like radio, like, I don't know, like, you can make argument for it, like cheaper, better. Basically, that's what Soviet has done a long time. But there's a reason like Soviets equipment doesn't work equivalent to Americans. It might feel like the cost to win, cost to effective ratio. Does it make sense? Maybe it doesn't. But it's like, that kind of thing. Like, Bugatti Veyron, right? It was like top speed of 240 miles per hour. Then it went 267 miles per hour, just like 16 miles per hour more. They needed 200 more horsepower just to do that because of that speed. So maybe that's just extra edge you need. You need to spend that kind of money just to have it, just to be that kind of better. If you remove all that, you're just like barely average at that point. So you can just remove all these things. This is what make it special in the first place.
The same Gao 8 cannon used on the A-10 because it's the best weapon, obviously, and stick that onto what is essentially a MiG-21. He was laughed out of the room. So, in regards to the Forbes article, no, the Pentagon, the US Air Force, or pretty much anyone else for that matter, has not admitted the F-35 was a failure. The whole thing, if you actually read the article and kind of read between the lines, is about how now the Air Force is seeking a potential replacement for the F-16 to be used as a less expensive trader and patrol craft, and to give pilots their needed air times, well as, perform low-risk missions in times where, using an F-35 just wouldn't really be necessary, while maintaining the same kind of stealth capability.
I mean, it's a $1 trillion project, right? God knows how much cost just for one F-35. F-35 is not a joke, right? F-15s cost immensely. That was made like 1960 or something, right? And I refuse to believe whatever was made in the modern world. If they can make F-15 in like 60s and 70s, no way in hell they can't make a better version of it in today's world. Especially when like in technology, US is still ahead. That's the thing, right? All the technology, all the AIs and electronics, like they have the monopoly, right? And the way too many advances happened after the F-15. They needed to put F-15C, right? All these letters that to put on just to update it up with somewhat better technology. And even you can't just revamp the whole thing unless you make it again. That's why they made F-35 in the first place. No way in hell it's not going to be good. I don't see that.
As well as use the more modern, up-to-date missiles that are currently under development, but also to sell to Eastern European nations who can't quite afford to buy into the F-35 program, all of whom are now suddenly very interested in replacing their old Russian jets for...
I mean, yeah. Do you want an F-35? How much it costs your kidney? Like, no, I'm not doing that. So yeah, how they gonna buy F-35?
Some weird reason. The ungrounding of this article and the propagation of the bullshit that the F-35 has somehow failed is on the work of one Dan Ward, another proud member of the Reformers cult and author of the book The Simplicity Cycle, which obviously gets a plug. And with a book like that, I'm sure you could understand why the existence of a complicated fighter jet might confuse him. The engineering motto of keep it simple, stupid is something that, is a very good lesson to learn for engineers, but basically it boils down to simple things to do simple tasks, i.e. don't Rube Goldberg a machine that is overcomplicated for no reason, like these fucking rechargeable shoes. But the concept of keep it simple...
Yeah, that does obviously, right? That's KISS, right? Keep it simple, stupid. All that saw it as an Occam razor type of thing. It doesn't make sense in that way, but it makes sense to me. Like simplicity, basically. Whenever like Germany is like the best example, like that's the whole thing of Germany, right? Over engineer it. Whenever you see German things like, oh god damn it, they just overdid it every time. New Mercedes S-Class comes out, they overdid it. Obviously that's the case at the time, but usually people follow in that footstep whatever Mercedes does, right? Whatever Mercedes brings out today, people will follow in 10 years type of thing. But then again, right? Over engineering at the largest scale can help if done right. That's the whole thing with Germany, right? There's a reason why in World War I, World War II, Germany was such a powerhouse, right? Over engineering did work in a way, right? Obviously, if you take on the whole fucking world, you're not going to win. So, yeah, over engineering, but there's if you're like really technologically advanced, you're just going to be better, right? I guess it depends how you do it. For simplicity, it makes sense, but like there's a limit to it. Everything has an asterisk on top of it. Like, you can't just point blank just say a slogan and that's it. You win. That's not how we work.
Stupid kind of falls apart when you have to apply it to the idea of building a stealth fighter that can operate as an interceptor, ground attack aircraft, bomber, hover, land and take off from carriers, and operate in a hostile environment where things like lasers, drones, and over-the-horizon hypersonic stealth missiles exist, while staying combat relevant for the next 50 years. Not because we want one aircraft to perform all these roles and do all these things, but because that is what an aircraft needs to be able to do to stay on top of a modern battlefield. Do you see the problem? I mean, how do you do all that in a simple way? Because if you can figure that out, if you can build that kind of plane that's cheap and simple, then congratulations. The US Pentagon would like a word. Here's $1 billion from the US black budget. Shut up and go do it. Prove it. In theory, it's very easy to demand things be kept simple and cheap, but in practice, the world does not quite work like that. And no, it can't be done just by putting bigger engines onto an F-15. You can't just keep upgrading legacy aircraft and expecting it to work indefinitely. That's not how anything works. That's like putting a new hat on a dead horse. It's a new hat, yeah, but it's still a dead horse. That said, Dan does make a good point, and he is right. The F-35 is an expensive plane, especially to run. It's a high-end fighter, and if you have limited high-end fighters, you don't want them in places where they are simply being wasted, especially if all it's doing is giving pilots their needed airtime to remain qualified. That role has always been performed by the F-16, which the Air Force stopped purchasing in 2001 and now consider fully outdated. And no, as I said before, it's not easy to just update these things. There is a flip side to making things cheap, and this is where people like Dan Ward have their failings.
Aerodynamics, aerodynamics, who gives a shit, right? Just like put a bigger engine on it. That's how it works. Like, not like it's like boils down to literal rocket science at this point. No. Just put a bigger engine on it. Like, just like, changes bit of a design, make it look more better. That's it. That will do it. But it's that easy. Why the hell do you think it required $1 trillion just to develop it, right? You think this is a joke?
In his first book, Dan penned the idea of the fire system. Fast, inexpensive, restrained, elegant. As if style has something to do with combat effectiveness. I think he just needed an E, and he couldn't really think of anything else. I mean, what else do you? Fast, inexpensive, restrained, elephant? I don't know. His belief is that technological innovations can be acquired by small teams with small budget.
E, what can be E? Exuberant? I mean, I don't know. Exuberant can be like, something that is like such a like engineering type of design that it scares people. I don't know.
On short deadlines, much faster, and with less expense, as the limited time and budget forces the team to concentrate on the sole problem, without getting distracted and adding extra features, which he believes engineers will simply add on a whim if they're too relaxed. You'll note here Dan Ward has never worked as an engineer on a design team. He worked in equipment testing. He now works as an advisor to a company that leases out management advisors to military contractors. You'd be amazed how many reformers seem to work exclusively as advisors, not to the military, but to third-party companies, or to their friends who sneak them on to inflated Pentagon budgets via the back door, so they can pretend their stupid ideas have more credibility because, hey, look at all these experts that agree with me. In one of his many publications, this one titled The Simplicity White Paper, Dan quotes the following.
The pursuit of complex technology has resulted in the production of weapons that are high in cost, few in number and questionable in effectiveness.
That is a quote from Fighter Mafia member Franklin Chuck Spiney in his 8-hour-long briefing Defense Facts of Life, which would become the manifesto for the reformist movement. It argued that simplistic weapons had historically always been more effective than complex ones, and the US Air Force's obsession with complicated high technology.
For the love of God. I mean, that is true, but there's a reason behind it. Simplistic tools are used mostly wherever there's like warfare, right? And there's a reason where they're used there because they're going to be effective at that task. Complex and advanced technology are used in very specific scenarios, which are already impossible to do. So success rate is not going to be that higher. It's just like you have to look at this. Oh, look at the success rate of all this simplistic equipment is much better than all this complex machine. But yeah, the job you were trying to do with the complex machine, you wouldn't have done that anyway. Whatever success you get is like more, and that success is so important that justifies all this cost.
Versus the simplistic, rugged weapons of the Soviet Union would lead to the country's inevitable doom. The complicated weapon he was talking about was of course the F-15, which was under development at the time. Spiney and the other Fighter Mafia members wanted the F-15 to be a radarless gun plane. The Air Force ignored them, and the F-15 went on to become the most successful fighter jet of all time, which at the time of recording still holds the highest air-to-air kill-to-loss record at 105 kills to 0 losses. Dan, of course, ignores this and goes on to complain about the complexity of the F-15 over the simplicity of the F-16.
Name me one thing that's like you think is like not simplistic or engineer is not effective. Blackbird, okay, disintegrator, it was expensive as fuck, but it worked. Right? It worked until like satellites and things become. Satellites are over-engineered things. Why do you need to throw shit in the space? It works. It works so well that 90% of our life wouldn't work without it. Drones is like the pinnacle of over engineering in today's world. It works. It works at a level that's the flex. Oh, I have a drone. Atomic bomb is over engineered shit. Why do you need like just strap on a few ton of TNT and throw that? And why do you need like a fission and a Manhattan project? Look at the effectiveness of it, the fear of it. That alone, like deterrent. What all the like Hubble type telescope that they used for surveillance, that removed all the plane Black Hawks and everything. Didn't require manpower for do it. Constant surveillance. People won't even know that you're surveilling it. Not until very recently. Nowadays, people can detect satellites and satellite click missile and things like that. Not at the time that was developed. So what do you over? There is no such thing as over engineered in this way. Okay, ground to ground combat where it's just like basic things are needed. If you use something over engineered, then you're just using it something wrong. But whenever something over engineered with quotation was made, for the job it was made, it did it perfectly, right? When did it fail? And those jobs would not have possible without it. And those jobs were very important. Without it, like, you wouldn't be blinded by lots of intel and things. So I don't know what the fuck they're talking about. I understand, but it's like without understanding the grander picture, they're just bullshitting based on like, simplicity is better. Okay, yeah, but you need more nuance and context.
Claiming that the mythology of keep it simple stupid meant that the F-16 had a development time of just 8 months, compared to the 13 years of the F-15, failing to understand, of course, that much of the technology used on the F-16, including the infrastructure that utilised in its creation, such as wind tunnels, was the result of the development of the F-15. The F-16 was not a project that ran alongside the F-15 on a more constrained budget, and in fact came out much later, development starting in 1974, 2 years after the F-15's first flight, and used much of the same technology and expertise that had been developed for the F-15. The F-16 had been developed as a completely independent project. It would have probably taken just as long on just as high a budget. Dan Ward, of course, ignores this because it would defeat his point. Ward's inability to differentiate between unneeded technology and technology he doesn't think is needed is why people like him and the rest of the reformers don't work in the military, and why videos like this need to keep being made, to remind you all that the mainstream media is not a credible source as it once was. Subscribe to Ground News. But Ward was not hired for his expertise. He was hired because he is a walking flesh woozle production machine. Everything he says sounds credible and has that ring of truth to it, which is great if you run a management advisory company and want to show off your credibility to stupid people who need management advisors. But like the rest of the reformers, he has absolutely no idea what he's talking about, is not qualified to even understand the basic principles of what he is talking about, and his arguments come entirely from thought-terminating cliches. I swear to God, if another person looks at me with that same shit-eating grin and says, but jack of all trades, master of none, in relation to the F-35, I may suddenly start advocating for mandatory IQ tests and the death penalty. Okay, this annoys me. I'm just gonna rant for a second here. The phrase jack of all trades.
I was afraid he might have some quote that Nazis had or something. Just like, oh man, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. You're going in that area. Don't do it. I know anger can do that, but don't do it.
Master of none is supposed to apply to people who spend all their time learning new trades and skills as opposed to just focusing on one thing and mastering it. It doesn't really apply to a machine that can do two things. It's like claiming you need to drag a garden shed full of tools along with you on a camping trip because your Swiss Army knife is a jack of all trades and therefore not specialist enough for your needs. And now suddenly everyone else is pulling straws and who has to share a tent with you. So when it comes to the F-35 and refuting the claims many make about it, I could tell you how important modern computers, in particular data link, which older aircraft don't.
I mean, you don't need to talk about this much. As soon as you said like, okay, there are no experts and they're just saying this because this idiot believe the simplicity is better and F-35 must be bad because of all the cost and things like that. That was, conversation was over just then. Like, okay, that is just bullshit. Right? I just thought that somebody from the project or somebody actually did the testing and realized the F-35 is not good. If that's not the case, that we just, this is like another modern thing. Past 15 years, 10 years, basically this has become. Bullshit has gone way too high. People just claim things and like no fear of nothing. Like nobody's going to refute it. Nobody's going to challenge them. right? There's not going to be something like a defamation of any kind, right? I'm surprised how US government doesn't, or this, like, who are they making this, like, forgot the name of them, right? Lockheed or whatever, doesn't just jump with like defamation. What do you mean it doesn't work? We use $1 trillion for this. You're going to claim this? Like, give us proof.
Has become, or how difficult it is to program jets from the 70s to work with modern missiles, which is the equivalent of trying to install an RTX 3080 onto a fucking ZX Spectrum, or how big a factor stealth has become in recent years, how detection range has become the deciding factor in who wins an engagement, not maneuverability, how modern-day radar systems have nullified the anti-radar tactics employed by pilots in the 80s and 90s, even if they still do work in DCS world, how helmet-based systems have meant that a plane no longer needs to point at whatever it wants to target, and how data link with drones means that aircraft
Don't want to pause too much, but nowadays stealth mostly means just evading a computer. Everything computerized, missiles and everything. Like detection, missile will launch, will chase it with an insane level of accuracy and will take it down. So stealth just mean like, all the sensors and things exist today, all the detectors that exist today, just dodging that. Not a human, not nothing, just pure point blank computer.
can now fire at targets with missiles as equally as stealthy as they are from over 800 miles away, never showing up on the enemy's radar because they never actually entered the fucking country. In any future war, swarms of aircraft will fight battles, never having seen their opponents, eyes almost entirely focused on a computer screen, information sent to them via systems on board drones and AWACS systems hundreds or often thousands of miles away, and the destruction of those systems will take priority over enemy aircraft. But that doesn't sound cool. It doesn't bring the image most of us will see in their mind of World War III, the dogfights, etc., what is known as the Top Gun factor. So it's kind of almost dismissed that this is reality. Instead, the ego accepts the possible of the fantasy and tries to justify it through references to past wars and the various buzz pieces and headlines that they know about, and forget that the Korean War and Vietnam were over 60 years ago, and thus the lessons of Korea or the lessons of Vietnam that the gun always beats the missile. Bullshit, bullshit, bullshit.
When was this video? I'm guessing it doesn't know about the Ukraine thing. I guess it didn't happen around this time. I don't know. But then again, like, Ukraine war is like kind of different in this way because it's not war between two major powers, right? If the all-out war breaks loose, right, I think we'll face instant worst-case scenario. Like, I don't know how something would like that trigger. It would be slow and steady, growing in tension. But if it just point-blank happens, major powers of the world suddenly decides to attack each other. I don't know why would that happen, but if that happens, I think the worst-case scenario would happen first with the nukes and shit, right? And the other thing would like tactical attacks on like something like fuel depots and fuel related things. Because one thing World War II was scarce resources, because Hitler didn't have oil. By the end, that was his issue, right? So they would destroy all that. So we can develop all the technology like F-35 and all that, but I fear when the time comes, if that kind of scenario happens, which I don't think it can happen at that level, but if that kind of scenario happens, all the equipment will be useless because you won't have fuel and things to use them in the first place, right? Mostly place will be by nuked, but this scenario doesn't work because tension will rise slowly, right? It will reach a point where people will decide to basically, conserve their things and protect their things and resources and everything, right? And war will escalate slowly, not at that level. At that point, you would need something like F-35 and things like that.
The maneuverability of old Russian jets, etc., are now all completely irrelevant. Because modern war, that shit's complicated. It's easier, far easier in fact, to think that all the old fighter mafia bullshit from the 70s and 80s is still relevant, because that's easier. And that we should judge modern fighter jets on 60-year-old standards against jets that were built for a completely different style of warfare. It's easier to sit back and think that military procurement is a circus designed to channel taxpayers' money into a general's retirement fund, because my mate Kevin, who was in the Marines and drove a truck around, slacked off half the time, smoked a fuck ton of weed, and never really advanced beyond basic, says so. And the military has unfortunately no short supply of underachievers who sat around in reserves and like to complain about everything and anything, thinking they know a little bit more about us disgusting civilians because they were actually in the military. And what branch did you serve in? Ha ha ha, thought so, smug Luke. To put it simply, in the most simple language that I can think of, and I tried doing this with a group of English people in a pub, and it worked on them, so if it doesn't work on you, dear Christ. The F-15, the 16, the A-10, and whatever, is to the F-35 as the crossbow was to the gun. I mean, the gun was loud and expensive and very difficult to use. It was also not particularly accurate and couldn't be used in the rain. I mean, we're talking very early guns here. So why would anyone want one when you have this elegant, quiet, simple weapon that can be knocked out by a half-decent craftsman in a basic workshop in about half a day? And the ammunition is literally just sharp sticks, which are everywhere. Any idiot can pick one up and use one. Guns are an expensive fad. The crossbow has always worked for us in the past. History says so. And so many people believed that. I mean, there are examples of generals throughout medieval Europe refusing to use guns and sticking with the crossbow, right up until about 1503 and the Battle of Seringola, where about 9,000 of the most powerful troops Europe had to offer, with about 40 cannons led by one of the best commanders of the day with a complete tactical and numerical superiority, lost because his opponent had guns. In spite of all their apparent drawbacks, guns could do what crossbows couldn't, which was penetrate heavy armor, and like cover and even shields. It made the concept of armor and shields completely obsolete, which is why armies around this time kind of stopped using them. And there are numerous examples of this happening all across the world. Guns had changed the face of war, and heavy armor and swords and crossbows, the old ways, just didn't work anymore. This was the dreadnought effect, something I've spoken about before. A period of transition where a single new invention changes the rules of warfare to a point where established conventional wisdom no longer applies. And in a way, that's where we're at with the F-35. War has evolved beyond what conventional wisdom and that tiny reptilian part of everyone's brain that tells them that fighter jets are awesome can logically process. You can't explain to the common public that blitzkrieg is not a battle tactic that works anymore in a simplistic enough way that fits into a Twitter post. I mean, people compare the military.
That is so true. Would Blitzkrieg work in today? I guess depends how you do it, like nuance and more complexity. I don't know, man. In today's world, like, yeah, I think Russia tried to do similar thing. Didn't work as far as I can think. I don't know if Russia did it right or not with that, but yeah, it definitely didn't work.
Of nations by looking at numbers, and the bigger number means obviously the better army. You know, the speed and armor of the firepower of this tank are so much better than that tank, therefore this tank wins the battle. Just kind of fucking bullshit. But war doesn't work like that. You know, since Russia invaded Ukraine, we've had a number of popular media sites asking, why were the experts so wrong? The people who predicted that Russia could wipe out Ukraine in 48 hours were left scratching their heads and searching for the copium explanations that exonerated them from looking like an idiot. And this is where all the bullshit propaganda tropes come from, you know. Oh, they haven't deployed their elite units yet, or this is only a tiny part of Russia's army. We've yet to see the full force come crashing down, or, you know, this is all part of Putin's grand master plan. Just you wait and see. Etc., etc. Because Russia's numbers are bigger than Ukraine's, so logically they should be able to win, and they aren't. And this is confusing.
Yeah, but Ukraine's
and what
defending.
these articles never really seem to consider is that the answer is not that the experts were wrong, it's that the experts, or the experts they were listening to, were not actually experts. The term military analyst is not a legally protected term. It's not like doctor, it's more like economist. You know, any asshole can start calling themselves one and fart out a vaguely plausible opinion on the current situation. Real experts, the real analysts, and the Russian studiers, and, you know, people who actually knew what they were talking about, knew this was all going to happen from day one. And many said so, but they were ignored, because they offered complicated explanations to a very complicated.
So I know what's gonna happen. It's gonna be a long, slow process of warfare. It will be back and forth. It will take time. Ugh, what an asshole. I don't like that. What do you have to say? Yeah, it's gonna be over in 48 hours. Putin is just gonna crush everything. It's gonna be over before somebody can utter the words Ukraine. Yeah, I'm gonna write that one in my forum. There you go. That's the expert I wanna listen to. So that's what basically happens. It's just so insane, man. That is true, right? Like that has to be like some kind of like a doctor type term for an actual experts who were actual in military, who were like that general type of position, who can understand the battlefield rather than just anybody just spewing shit out.
Situation. The reformers, meanwhile, the pretend analysts, like people like Sprey and Ward and whoever else, who like work or worked in third-party advisory companies and sell tickets to lectures, are not experts in military analytics. They are salesmen. They sell